crafty friends, it's Jess from jesscrafts.com, and today I have a video that features a card with the newest release from Newton's Nook Designs. They're coming out with 5 holiday sets. The one that I'm showing off today is Newton's Curious Christmas, and you see there are 3 main images and then some smaller images and sentiments added to the set. I will be showing each stamp set this week. I'll have one day for each stamp set, and we have a blog hop going on, and you can enter to win the stamps, so be sure to check out that link down below. As I start the card, I know that I want to work with the image of Newton sitting on the roof looking at Santa, and I also want to use the sentiment "'Twas the night before Christmas" because it's clearly before Christmas and he's looking out, and so I thought that would suit it well. There's a lot of really cute sentiments in the set, though. So you see that I looked at my dies ahead of time, and the dies I'm using are the MFT Stitch Circle Stackables. And once I've decided that, I'm ready to start my stamping, so I'll know what I need to use. I'm using just white paper for the image of Newton because I'll be coloring it in, and then a red paper for the sentiment because I don't want to take any time on coloring on that. I'm going to be using a masking technique because I want to create the sky around Newton and the moon, and I want to make sure that I can go all the way to the edge with it. So if I mask off Newton, then I will be able to make sure that the ink goes all the way to the edge. And I don't want to use, sometimes I use a technique where I just kind of use the ink dauber and rub it close to the image, and that works well and looks good sometimes and is a little bit faster, but this time I want to make sure it goes all the way to the edge. So I stamped Newton on mask paper, and then I'm going to stamp him onto my final image of the circle. With the mask paper, I was sure to make sure there was a little bit of extra room because I actually want to extend the roof in that image so that it will go all the way to the edge. And so I'm just going to take a Copic multiliner and draw a line all the way to the edge. You see that paper there that I'm using to create a straight edge is actually a little bit of a sketch, and sometimes before I create cards I just sit down and draw a little sketch and think about how am I going to use a particular set and what kind of techniques I'll use to show it off. And I'm using the Copic multiliner because just like with Memento Tuxedo Black ink, which will not spread with Copics, the multiliner will also not spread. So I stamped the image in Memento Tuxedo Black, and then I'm using the Copic multiliner to extend it out. And now the mask will fit right over the whole image of Newton. But I didn't worry about cutting around Santa's sleigh, just cut around the moon. And now I'm adding some distress ink to create the background. I'm not going to be doing any extra techniques, I'm just going to be inking. I'm starting with Faded Jeans, which is this blue color. And then I'll move on to Black Soot, which is, of course, the black color. When I do night skies for the winter time, I typically like to do blues, but then when I do it for fall time and Halloween, I tend to do purples. And I think it's just because in my mind, Christmas is blue. I associate blue with snow and that kind of stuff. And but you could do any colors that seem suitable to you for a night sky. I first laid on the blue, added black around the edges, and then went back with the blue to blend it out. I use generally a kind of dab and twist motion. So now I'm going to remove the mask, I removed the mask, and I'm going to be coloring in the moon and Newton and the house. For the moon, I just want to add a little bit of color because generally I want the moon to be white, but when you look up in the night sky you do see some gray on the moon, so I'm taking C3 and C1 and then the colorless blender. So I'm adding the C3 right around where Newton touches the moon, and there'll be the most shadow. And then I'm blending it out with C1 and then to the colorless blender. I'm doing a really simple blend on the roof. I'm adding the darkest colors around Newton where Newton meets it again because that would create shadows. So I'm using E37 for that, blending it out with E35. With small images like this, I generally like to keep the coloring pretty simple and only use 2 colors. I find that when you move on to 3 colors, you're adding a lot of ink onto the page and it can get saturated. But right here on Newton, I'm going to have to add 3 colors to achieve the look that I want. And so you just need to be kind of conscious of that and maybe even give yourself a little bit of drying time in between each layer, because if you're not using super thick paper, you can experience bleeding. I personally use 110-pound Georgia Pacific cardstock. It's relatively cheap. It's widely available. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it at your local Walmart, and it works well enough, but it's not good if you like to saturate your paper really well. For Newton, I'm trying to create an orange cat, so I'm using E95 and E97 with YR61. E97 is an orangey color, even though it's in the brown E family. And so I am trying to blend it out with another orange color, but if I went just to E95, it doesn't create the same level of orange that I'm looking for, so I pulled that Y61 in there and then used E95 as my lightest color. And I made sure to create a highlight down his middle so that it makes him appear round. I do want to add a touch of detail to the sky, but I didn't want to do any fancy techniques and take any longer with the card, since I'm already going to be doing some stamping to create a pattern paper panel. So I just want to add some stars. And I love the Newton sets because they have those little details in them, like the addition of the stars or snowflakes. This one has a present, all those little touches. I want to stamp in white. I find that the best white ink is the Hero Arts Unicorn White Pigment ink, and I showed that earlier. It is a very juicy stamp pad though. So if you press your stamp too much into it, you're going to get ink on the outsides of your stamp and you're not going to get a clear impression. So it's very important to just barely tap your stamp onto the ink pad. You see that when I first started, I actually had to stamp off and clean off my stamp because I put way too much onto the stamp, and it would have created a too saturated, and it would have left blotches, and then I would have had to problem solve and figure out how to fix my stamp. So I'm glad that I caught it. So I fixed my panel. So I'm glad that I caught it, and I want to make sure that I emphasize that tip to you so you don't have any trouble with it. So just barely touch your stamp to the pad. I'm going to use the same unicorn white ink to add some interest to this piece of cardstock. This is some pattern paper from Basic Gray. What I really like about Basic Gray papers, and why I have way too much Basic Gray paper, is that they include a mix of these semi-solids with their patterns. So they make these great patterns, and then they give you the same colors from the collection in solid colors that aren't completely and totally solid. You just have a little bit of interest or a little bit of distressing, and so it adds a nice touch without being really stark. But it also is great for techniques like this, where you just want to add some of your own interests, pull in some images from the set, and create your own pattern paper. I'm doing a very subtle pattern paper this time because I'm doing white on this light blue. So it's just enough to add interest if the person who's looking at the card, the person who receives the card, looks closely. And I like to add things like that, like little surprise touches, so that way when they get the card, they see the first initial, cute image colored in, and then as they look at it closer, they realize there's other little details going on, and it make it special. I think that the stitched panels, the stitched dies, create that same kind of effect, where at first you just see a circle and you look closer and you think that that's an interesting detail. So I hope that's appreciated by the people who receive my cards. Anyway, I have adhered that panel on across the bottom. I like to use the rule of thirds. Rather than placing the panel right in the middle, I try to place it on the bottom third, and I think that that generally creates a nicer effect. And I'm going to use pop dots to add the panel to my card, and just a quick detail where I'm rounding the corners with a corner chomper from We Are Memory Keepers. And that'll be it for my card today. I'm going to mount it on some white cardstock. And I hope that you will join me for the rest of this week to see more cards with the release. And if you missed some of my other videos, you can head on back. Be sure to check out my blog so you can find out how to win these stamp sets. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe to my channel if you want to see more. And have a great day. Thanks for watching. Bye.